The Killer may be David Fincher's best film, and it's not for the reasons that you may think. David Fincher has long been attacked for this sort of meticulous style of filmmaking. He has this desire to show things that are glossy and clean, and yet are simultaneously exposing the darkest side of ourselves. His films so often grapple with this idea of what it means to be human, and I think The Killer is a perfect choice of a novel to be adapted into a film. It's not the film that Netflix is going to try to sell you. It is not this big action piece, John Wick type of film. It is slow, it is methodical, it is waiting, and that is at the core of everything David Fincher is, and I think of David Fincher's very first feature. I think this is sort of the response to that. This action intense film that's supposed to follow up Aliens and Alien, and although Alien itself has very little action sequences in it and is mostly sort of the slow burning horror, at its core it is about the horror that is about to come. It is waiting, anticipating those action scenes. And Aliens, it's all about the action itself and the violence and the shooting and the fighting. And Alien 3 tries to be some combination of these two things, and it doesn't work. And it barely works as a David Fincher film or as any sort of film. We sort of see his style more when it comes to Fight Club, and certainly with his later films like Zodiac and The Social Network. But this film, even if it's not his best film, it is the film that is most David Fincher. And perhaps it is that in our careers we've just become more and more of ourselves, or more willing to be ourselves, or we have more control, particularly as directors, because filmmaking is this group effort and there's so many people involved. Your voice can often get muddled in the many voices of the filmmaking team. But this film seems like it was made for David Fincher. If you think back to all of David Fincher's work, what he is mostly interested in isn't necessarily violence, and The Killer is not a violent film by any means. There are some violent moments in this film. I certainly wouldn't show this to my own children, but it's not really about the violence, or rather the violence is secondary to what this film is actually about. And all of David Fincher's work is really about. David Fincher is a man obsessed with the clean, the meticulous, the leading edge of this updated cinema, to the point that it feels almost too real, as if it's sharper than real life itself. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And he does the same thing here. And I think part of the reason that he does that is he's fooling our eyes. He's tricking us by creating the illusion of this real life image. We are forced to see all of the ugly blemishes that hide behind it that we don't see in real life. And that's exactly what we get with The Killer. Here is Michael Fassbender without emotion, without anything. A very hard thing to do as an actor, and I think he gives a great performance here. But that's not to say that he's without feeling, and I think we see that in our voiceover here, is all of the feelings that are underlying everything, always trying to bury them away, hide them away, how the jobs that we do sort of break us and create this sort of inhumaneness within us all. And that's not to say that the 9-to-5 job we all have is exactly the same as going out and killing people, but there is a certain likeness. And that likeness comes in this idea of, how do we identify ourselves? Do we identify ourselves with the work that we do? Do I identify myself as a filmmaker or a teacher, or as this or that or the other? Because these are things that I get paid to do, and sometimes I wonder if that is how I identify myself. And if that is your identity, that's all you are, then how do you live without that? He repeats this line a couple of times throughout the piece, this idea that our life is merely our past. That's it. That's the only thing that can define who we are, is who we were. Which, how else are we supposed to define ourselves? Without our past, we are nothing. There is no present moment. It's just the past always leaping on top of that. And that's something that Michael Fassbender here is constantly grappling with. And when you do get those few moments of violence, of action, they feel not only exciting and thrilling, but extremely weighty. Because even though he's always prepared for everything as he's supposed to be, fights never seem to go according to plan. Nothing ever seems to go according to plan. And yet, I'm sitting here throughout this piece rooting for him. I want him to win. I want him to succeed. And I don't really know why. There's no good reason. And this is something I was really struggling with the other day when I was watching Michael Mann's Ferrari, is I couldn't connect with the character. And yet here is a sociopathic killer, which gives us so little to work with, and yet I can't help but find myself rooting for him. Not because he's a good person, not because he does good things, but I think it's because of the magic of that voiceover. And particularly because the voiceover seems meaningless throughout almost the entire piece. And I think this is the sign of a good voiceover, is when it seems to have nothing to do with the film. It's not explaining any plot or any storyline. It's not even really explaining any of the characters' motivations. All that we have here is someone talking to us. It feels like we have someone that we're having a conversation with. And I think that's the real reason that the voiceover is necessary for the piece. Not that the piece wouldn't work without it. And I would love to see an edit without the voiceover at all. It'd be a very slow piece, but fascinating and intriguing. But I think what the voiceover does is we befriend him. I mean, for the first 20 minutes of this film, it's just him sitting in a room talking to himself. And that's it. It's not until really 30, 45 minutes in the film till we get our first quote-unquote action sequence beyond a single shooting. And even those action sequences leave a lot to be left desired. And I don't think that's an accident. I believe that David Fincher knows exactly what he's doing here. This is a masterclass in filmmaking and not giving us what we want, because the killer himself never gets what he wants. All of those kills that he makes, they're never satisfying, no matter the kill. And we never feel satisfied in the way that we are satisfied when we're watching a John Wick style film. When we see someone in those films dies, it's extremely satisfying. We're excited. But in these films, when you watch someone die, it's not that it's sad, it's this emptiness. And I think this is something that David Fincher captures really well in this film, is this emptiness that Michael Fassbender has inside himself and presses onto all of us, where even when he does all the things that he wants to do, he gets this revenge. There's no point. It doesn't matter. And in those final moments when he's sitting at his home in front of that pool, his wife sitting beside him talking about how our lives are defined merely by our past, it's not hopeful, but it's not sad either. And it left me with the strange feeling of not knowing where to go or what to be. And I can't help but describe this film as weirdly inspiring. Not that I'm not gonna go kill people. I have no desire to become a mercenary of any kind. I'm sure I would be terrible at it. But there's just something about his ability to just stay focused, always stay on task, no matter what, no matter who. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I mean, maybe there's something just up here that just doesn't work right. But I can't help but truly just be excited by every moment of this film. And it's one of those films that I want to watch again and again. And this is what I think is the difference between great cinema and good cinema. Great cinema doesn't necessarily have better techniques than good cinema. The true difference is that in great cinema, you forget all that. You forget everything that's going on, and you're lost in that moment. So I'm going to give this film a strong 9 out of 10. And I can't wait to watch it again.